Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to welcome you all to an illustrious session on connecting the dots of well-being at the workplace. My name is Soumya, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's session. Employee well-being has become a critical pillar for organizations in the evolved sense of the workplace as well as the workforce. It is not only related to employees' happiness anymore, but has also become a holistic approach towards the way we work. Furthermore, in the dynamic environment that we live in today, holistic employee well being is now one of the key ways of attracting and retaining talent, especially the millennials, making it vital for organizations to align themselves with what the employees prioritize. Economic Times, ETHRWorld, and Diageo have crafted an exclusive roundtable discussion which will highlight the challenges and road ahead of employee well-being for the future. As we move ahead, please join me in welcoming the collected group of leaders for this session. Welcoming first Arif Aziz, CHRO, Diageo India, Anupam Trehan, People and Communities HR Leader for APJC, Cisco, Lakshmi C, MD HR Lead, Accenture, and Roshni Vadhwa, Director HR, L'Oreal India. Welcome Arif, Anupam, Lakshmi, and Roshni. Great, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that the audience is really excited about what's coming next. So before I delve into the much awaited discussion with the stellar panel, let me remind you all that we have budgeted time for the question and answers at the end of the session. Though you can continue to share them during the course of the discussion, we will try and get the answers for all of them by the end of it. So with this, I'm excited to kickstart this conversation with this, stellar panel, and let me, take it through with the entire panel at one go. And that's something that I always love, taking perspectives right at the start of this conversation from all our speakers. So I'm going to start firstly with Arif. Forbes has suggested that future of work is employee well-being, and it is now further enabling the organizations to combat the great resignation phenomena. This is something which is a very strong statement, and I would love to hear from you on first that how you have used holistic well-being as an effective tool for addressing the great resignation.
It's a great question. Thank you, Soumya, and it's a pleasure to be here. Let me share an anecdote and a story, something which really helped us unlock and learn as we went through the journey. So this is the time when we were really coming out of the COVID situation, and our manufacturing operations were starting at the end of the first phase of lockdown, which was quite drastic in terms of how the entire country changed. Everything was closed, and our manufacturing plants were starting from scratch. And I remember one of our plants, which is actually a plant which started in 19th century, so that old. In Rosa, some of you may not have heard the name of that place in Uttar Pradesh. I was talking about the plant in Rosa, which is in Uttar Pradesh, one of our very old plants. As that operation got started, I remember our plant manager walking to the shop floor and talking to employees and saying that we are coming out of a very tough situation for the country from a society and economy standpoint. And for us to restart the operation, the opportunity is a lot about how we make a difference to the company, restart, rebuild. How do we really start, dialing up the economy back again, because it's critical for all of us, for all of our sustenance. But guess what? We are still in a pandemic situation. We are still in a very tough environment. We need to figure out the right ways of working and really take care of safety measures and so on. The change in engagement was not really saying what to do, so not really telling people what to do, but involving our employees in designing the safety practices, in really creating the right policies, right infrastructure to take care of people. And they came up with a lot of unique things like, how do you put glass separators between people? How do you completely change the design of assembly line so that we are minimizing physical contact? And I must say, I'm really proud and give a tremendous credit to our manufacturing operations, because they were able to restart with tremendous engagement. Our people were super excited to come there because they were reshaping how we are engaging and how we are designing safety practices for our people, we had absolutely no absenteeism problem. Within 2 weeks of starting, we were able to get to close to 100% production out of that plant. And what it did to us is taught a very important lesson for all of us around well-being as a whole. Well-being is not about policies and practices which get designed centrally and shared with employees. If we want to really make well-being a big differentiator, you've got to create a culture where well-being is co-shared with employees. You're involving people to design the right support system, culture, create the right environment, because that can really engage and excite people. And we have then, from that learning, taken the journey ahead, and we have, I'll talk further in our conversation, created wellness ninjas where our employee resource groups are driving well-being within Diageo. So I think it's that learning of how we change gears, change from policy systems to really move towards culture, which can really become a differentiator.
Absolutely. That's quite tremendous. Thank you for sharing that, Arif. I'm coming to Lakshmi now.
Thank you, Soumya, and very excited to be here to start with. I'm going to give it a slightly different spin to this question because, at Accenture, we are a talent-led organization, and for us, our people's health and safety have always been our top priority. And for many years now, our initiatives, our people programs have been anchored in what we believe, what we call a truly human philosophy that enables people to bring their whole selves to work. And our well-being strategy has also therefore been focused on mind, body, heart, and soul. So really emphasizing holistic well-being. And what Arif just shared resonated with me because we also partnered with our people on this journey by actively listening to them and co-creating these well-being experiences so as to address both their emerging and continuously evolving needs, as well as some of the trends that we observe in the industry at large. So while well-being has always been a big priority for us, over the last couple of years, we really sharpened our focus, not just for our people, but their families as well. For instance, the support for our people and their families through the pandemic, whether it be access to 24/7 emergency helpline or remote doctor consultations or home delivery of relief kits for COVID or oxygen concentrators or medicines, right? Or the caregiver leave that we introduced for people to take care of family members who were falling sick. In fact, we were probably one of the first in the industry to announce medical cover for COVID-19 vaccination and for our people, as well as their dependents. And today, through all of our efforts, including vaccination camps, we have more than 90% of our people in India are vaccinated, and we have more than 250,000 people. So while medical and vaccination support has been crucial, and through the pandemic, this has also required people to become more resilient. And so we've really been focused a lot on that and enabling this for our people through regular sessions with experts, with group counseling sessions, grief counseling sessions for those who experience loss. The other element that we prioritized from a health perspective was really enabling our people to work productively in a remote working environment. And we've always had flexible working policies for certain roles even before the pandemic, but the uptake of these flexible work options changed to a nearly 100% in our context during the pandemic. And so we extended a $250 work from home enablement allowance, options for people to purchase ergonomically designed work from home infrastructure so that people's home environments could become more conducive for virtual working. And we also introduced some new medical insurance benefits around physiotherapy treatment. And lastly, we increased the choice and flexibility available to our people. Our people can now, for example, personalize their benefits based on their own unique family situation. For example, if you take our medical insurance benefits program, right, people can now include their siblings or their parents or their in-laws in addition to their partner and partners as well, in addition to their spouse and children, or new benefits like fertility, surrogacy treatment. All of it became, as we saw kind of trends in the market, became very, very relevant. And they have more choice now. For example, in terms of even optional holidays, people can now choose to take off during their birthday and make their day really special. So in my view, holistic well-being of our people will continue to remain a priority for us as we continue to support our people and help them navigate what is continuing to be a highly volatile
Yeah,
environment. Back to you.
absolutely. That's quite amazing. Kudos on that, Lakshmi. Thank you so much for sharing it. Roshni, I'm coming to you next.
Very interesting. I think I really enjoy these kind of a session where, of course, I get to share what I do day in, day out, but I also get to learn what my colleagues are doing in the other organizations. So very nice perspective. I'm going to take a little slightly different spin, on this question because you also mentioned about the Great Resignation and how is it now linked to the well-being. We have gone through a very tough time of COVID in the last 2 years. And what I get to believe that, whilst we are coming out of this whole pandemic, more or less, life seemingly looking like a bit more normal these days as we start to go to office. Health, safety, and all the measures around always remains important. But if I were to look back, what we have done in the last 2 years and how the journey really going to go ahead, in the learnings that we have learned during the pandemic, there are two very hard-hitting focus areas which have emerged during this whole crisis. And the corporates are really seeing how we can sort of enlarge on that, on these two big areas. One is, of course, the digital and tech acceleration. Nothing to be told about that. Everyone knows about this. And second is all about wellness and well-being of people and how do we engage with our people in this whole new normal, which has now become no more new, but it's become more normal, ways of working today. So, whilst the businesses are, creating new models around technology and how to reach consumers, that's a very ongoing work that is happening. For HR and for the management at large, we all are now putting our heads together to see what this could be the new model of engagement with our people, which is very holistic from the wellness and also from a well-being point of view. So what really attracts people when it counts about the well-being and when it counts about staying in the organization and enjoying your stay, with the company? If you look at it at the basic level, and I think most companies have done it, I can't think of any companies who have, really not done this. They all have found ways to develop a very holistic wellness model, which is largely covered around health benefits, the medical support, including, employees, but extended family and the larger ecosystem, the whole thing about fitness, the financial advising, the EAP programs that most companies have done to sort of control the emotional and the anxiety level of people. We have done in our company, for example, wellness day offs, healing week programs, etc., etc., etc. I think it just goes on where I think it's becoming at a very fundamental level all of these aspects which organization should have it and must have it, and also build a culture around having a very healthy and fruitful life. But having said so, what are these new models that I'm talking about at L'Oreal? At least we've started to think about. I feel people today at the workplace are looking for different things over and beyond the aspects, because we're talking about great resignations, and there is something that people are looking forward to see outside the corporates. And what are those some things? I would like to, sort of iterate a few points on this. The first one, in my view, is sense of purpose. I think never before this pandemic, this whole realization of the generation today is about how do we engage with the cause, which is about giving back to society and using our time, effort, resources to be able to work with the community. And I think most organizations who are trying to find this place of recognizing what this purpose this company can, and I think Arif also spoke about a little bit in this conversation. I think this is something that is becoming really very critical for people to be at peace and be able to also engage with the organization while you are also working with them to serve the community at large. We at L'Oreal, for example, have started this whole green beauty campaign with Garnier, or the whole campaign that we did around stand up, for harassment against women at the street. I think these really took us really far off to engage with our people and be able to contribute. The second part that I would talk about is the flexibility. We all have now learned to work in hybrid, remote working, few days in office, few days at home, etc., etc. I think by and large, most organizations have started to fall in place as far as the hybrid model is concerning. But I think at L'Oreal, we are sort of going a bit more ahead than this to talk about what does this flexibility mean. Now, this flexibility really means how do I create different employment models, right? People are no longer looking for 9-to-5 jobs. That's not something that they are looking for. They want more, engagement-based or freelancing-based work, which is happening all around. Flexibility in location. So how can you be, geography agnostic in the way you are engaging with your people? Flexibility to work on different projects. Don't cast me into one role, one job. I like to learn something. This gives sort of kick to my development. So how are you engaging with me to be able to involve me in different and multiple projects? So that's something flexibility, I would say, as a definition, is evolving. The third one I would say is really a fast track career. I just feel that today, the whole traditional mechanism of talent management, talent review, boxing people, articulating the number of years in one role, second role, etc., is all completely getting thrown out of the window today. People are looking at dynamic career management and ability to do and learn different things at different point of time. So giving flexibility to people to choose what they want, flexibility to learn what they want to learn, and therefore creating those programs like the way we do flex learning programs. Hence, constant engagement through the career conversation to be able to help people find their personalized, sort of career track, and fast career track is something that is becoming extremely important topic. And the last one that I would really say is enabling and empowering culture. Okay, so businesses are becoming very complex. The normal hierarchies are no longer working. People are really steaming out their energy when you try to, put them into a complex situation. I think those are the times when you have to really re-engineer your process to see how it really pushes the decision making down the line. It pushes people to take decisions and be able to move faster and be very agile in the way they work. I think that's something that is becoming a very, very important aspect, again, as a fourth point that I would mention. So overall, I just think that these are some big challenges and disruptions that at least happening in L'Oreal around building the new engagement, model, so that we are able to ensure and retain and engage as well.
Absolutely. That's quite commendable. Thank you so much for sharing that, Roshni. This sounds really, really foolproof. So I hope the results are as great as you shared. So thank you once again. Anupam, I'm coming to you. What would your anecdote be on this one?
I think, I'm just going to go back to the quote that you said from Forbes. I think what's very interesting is if you look at the four of us, all of us are representatives from very, very different industries, right? And the fact that well-being is so top of mind across industries, I think in some ways just gives weight to what that quote said. But I think the other way to look at that quote is if you really strip, what does employee well-being actually mean, right? Like, what does it really, really mean? I think fundamentally, quite simply put, like as an employee, you want to work in an organization where you feel cared for, right? Fundamentally, that is what it boils down to. And it's interesting because if you look at the last 2 years and the experience that all of us have been put through, what have been some of our learnings through that, right? I think the first and foremost is that work no longer is a place that you go to, but it's what you do, right? Previously, all of us had this, even though work from home's been around for a really long time, but work was always a place. And I think the pandemic has kind of really, really accelerated that transformation with respect to the future of work, right? And that the fact that the future of work is hybrid. So I think that's number one. That was the biggest realization that we had. Linked to that, what we've also realized is that what employees want is flexibility and choice with respect to how and where they do their work, right? So that's been the other learning. The second one is health, safety, well-being, like the spotlight that was put on it through the pandemic, never before, right? It's always been a priority. Like for us in Cisco, it's always been a priority for us. But I think the spotlight that the pandemic put is that it's not just about physical well-being, it's not just about mental well-being, but it's also about financial well-being and career well-being, like Roshni said. So it suddenly threw a spotlight into well-being in a very, very holistic manner. And I think what makes that sentiment of health, safety, and well-being really, really come true is a culture of listening, is a culture of trust, is a culture of empathy. That is what brings it all to life, right? And I think for us at Cisco, we've been pretty fortunate, right? So for us, we know the future is hybrid. We're trying to see how is it that we can make that experience of working in a hybrid world be consistent, be fair, be inclusive for our employees, regardless of how and where they do their work from, right? We've always had focus on health and well-being. We're continuing to double down that focus, right? Whether it is physical well-being, whether it's mental well-being, whether it's financial well-being or career well-being, right? So we've got lots of initiatives. We've got partners all across the globe. We've done initiatives not just for our employees, but the pandemic affected people regardless of whether they were young, whether they were elders, whether they were single, whether they had a family. So we've also expanded a lot of our initiatives across families as well. And I think at Cisco, we've all as employees been very, very fortunate because this culture of trust and empathy comes right from the top. So our CEO leads the way. And he calls it out in global all employee meetings, saying it's perfectly okay to skip a meeting to go take care of your child. Your child takes priority over a meeting. And I think when you have your CEO leading the way, you feel like you have permission to take care of yourself, because sometimes people hesitate because you feel like you don't have permission. And I think that culture then really, really helps bring it to life. So I hope that helps, Soumya.
Absolutely. It does. Thank you so much, Anupam. And this definitely brings me to the second question. And while I was kind of putting them together, this thought was there that, leaders today are now, rethinking and kind of reprioritizing the well-being in the digital era. So I would love to go with the panel once again on this one, that how are you all acting as catalysts in reshaping the mental well-being experiences for your workforce in the current times? And we can just take like one example each. So that would be great. And let me start with Lakshmi now.
To me, this whole concept of mental well-being is not something that, it's not new for us. So therefore, the whole focus on, leaders and their role around well-being and reducing the stigma around mental health. I think Anupam touched upon, care and compassion. That's really where it starts. It starts with leaders being compassionate, and compassion requires a lot of courage, because leaders need to recognize that they can also be vulnerable, and that's okay. And it's okay to share with others what you are struggling with, because it then creates a psychologically safe space for others to do the same along with you. Leaders therefore need to kind of start from a position of compassion. They also need to create enabling structures that are focused on self-care, on building resilience among people. So in addition to creating those safe spaces, what we focused on was really enabling the frontline supervisors, so they could then recognize for any signs of stress or distress of people needing support quickly. And a lot of our people have now signed up as mental health advocates, and they regularly reach out to other colleagues to understand what support they need, or creating, really as part of the whole safe space, creating resource groups for our people community within the organization, because then they can discuss challenges, learn from each other, and get access to counselors or therapists or wellness experts to address their concerns. So in addition to creating these enabling structures or demonstrating leadership from the top, the other thing that has really worked for us is, we've really leveraged technology, and that's been a huge enabler for us. A couple of years ago, we launched an AI-based app and a chatbot which engages in empathy conversations with the user and shares techniques and tools for managing well-being. And that acts as an immediate and first line of support, especially when you're operating at the scale that we operate in. And like I said, we are about 250,000 plus people. And largely, of course, your own policies and benefits, you have to continuously review them. While we always have mental health consultation under our insurance policies, last year we extended that even to the families, because it's not just the individual, it's really the entire family that needs kind of support. So in my view, it is a very critical role that the leaders play in kind of shifting the language, shifting the and creating those spaces, similar to what Anupam shared in terms of taking care. When leaders step up and talk about it's okay to do what you need to do to take care of family, that's really when it all opens up, and that's when some of the stigma around even mental well-being starts getting dissipated. But I think we still have a journey to go in this country where there's still a lot of stigma around this, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that's a very powerful statement, Lakshmi. And thank you for sharing that. I think our audience would have definitely taken this down that, compassion requires courage. I think that's a beautiful line that you said. And secondly, of course, creating those enabling structures. So these are my two prime takeaways with what you shared. I'm coming now to Roshni. Roshni, what would be your one top, experience that we want to highlight here?
I think the new recipe that we're trying to find, and we are trying to also mobilize our managers and leaders, is to say empathy-led leadership and people-first mindset. I think that's really very important. Hybrid model is easier said than done. You come with the policy and your hybrid model is working. That's not the truth. It will be happening and possible only when your managers are completely, making it work, with all the flexibility that your people need. So the example that I can give here is the workshops that we are doing with our managers called Best of Both Worlds, where each manager and their teams are actually coming together to build their own rituals of how they would like to engage with each other and how would like to have their meetings planned. So what kind of meetings should happen, face to face? What kind of meetings can happen virtual, O+O format? Should we have like a break time between 1 to 2? Because we also need to respect there are a lot of women who are in our teams. And if they have to take care of the house, cooking, etc. in the afternoon, they should be given that time. Should we have no meetings after 6 o'clock so that people can just wind up their stuff and also focus on their, personal lives and so on. So each team is now coming together and building their own rituals. And that's the flexibility, and also for the manager to come together and engage, with their own teams to be able to see how this whole hybrid, way of working is happening. It's a new culture. I think this is something that we are trying to develop. And I always believe that culture can run only when it is well supported by processes and tools. So we are also building certain matrix and reward mechanism around this to recognize managers on this journey.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anupam, I'm coming to you for your one takeaway on this.
Sure. So Soumya, for us, the journey around mental well-being actually started back in 2018. Just to remind all of you, like that was the year where, we had seen some really successful global personalities pass due to suicide. And I remember like it was one of those incidents where, a lot of people were shocked with what they were seeing in the news. And I think for us, our journey around mental well-being actually started there because Chuck, our CEO, actually sent out a note to all employees, essentially calling out what was happening externally, but also saying that it's okay to not be okay, right? Like, so I think for us, our journey actually started there. And it's interesting because this whole piece around mental well-being is actually a journey, right? There is no ready answer. There is no one solution. There is no simple cookie cutter approach that you can take on this. Like Lakshmi mentioned, I think for us, the first year was just to break the stigma around mental well-being, right? And I'll give you a few examples over the years of things that we have done, right? So we've used a lot of our EROs or our employee resource organizations to help us. And this is outside of EAP and everything else that we had going on from mental well-being, right? Two specific situations. So we've got an ERO, which is essentially of families of children with special needs. So we actually partnered with them because, it can be a little challenging and it can be a little tough when you have a child with special needs. And so we actually partnered with them to see, hey, how do we take care of you as you are taking care of your child? And so that was an interesting one for us. So we've used our EROs very, very differently to also help us to help them, right? So that was one of the examples. Another example was, and this is not like a big solution, but one of the other examples that I have is, one of our employees actually had their child pass away. And as we were speaking to this employee to actually support them through this incredibly traumatic and period of grief, and we were like, how can we help you? Like, we've got all of this, like, how do we really help you? And this employee asked us, she's like, can you help me get in touch with parents who've gone through a similar experience, right? And so that suggestion actually led us to create a network of parents that were grieving so that they could actually be the support to each other, because that experience, also binds them. And I would say right now, with everything that's happening in Ukraine, the pandemic is there, but there's also things that are happening in Ukraine. we've got a page that is actually standing with Ukraine, and where we are actually helping our employees with, how do you deal with anxiety? How do you deal with trauma? How do you deal with stress? Some of it is even simple as, how do you breathe to be able to manage stress, right? So apart from access to experts, psychologists, therapists, EAPs, all these different sessions, we've done a few of these specific activities as well, some of them very point in time, but that's been our journey and our approach towards mental well-being.
Absolutely, Anupam. And what a journey this has been, I must say. These examples were giving me goosebumps, honestly. But I mean, big round of applause on that. I think these things are something that are really making a mark. Thank you. Thank you for just highlighting that. Arif, I'm coming to you now.
Thanks, Soumya. And I'm just going to build up on what everyone said. So like Lakshmi, Anupam, and Roshni, more than enough support, and we continue to evaluate how do we have the right policies, systems, and so on. But I think if there are two inflection points in our journey, and if I reflect on those, which have changed the way we engage and approach, the first one was around our narrative on employee experience. And we said our narrative on employee experience is we want to make daily moments for our people simple and critical moments special. And we realized that our definition of critical moments was narrowing to a promotion, role change, and not realizing that life and work are not separate. And when both of them are together and work is part of life, and when that happens, life actually takes precedence. And in that situation, you can't really have a definition of critical moments, which is not around what is happening in an employee's life. So that was one. How do you really completely change? And it's not just about a narrative. When you start using your employee experience definition with a different lens, then how you create the right support systems also changes. Two things we have done to support it. One is we are actually focusing a lot on our leaders being owners of how we translate well-being to our employees. We have stopped creating policies. We don't really have a flex policy. We have created the right tools, infrastructure support for our managers, and helping them to translate it for people. Because policies means you are controlling it centrally and not really empowering your leaders to translate it right for the people. And the next thing, which I think has worked well for us, is how do our leaders in visible forums and opportunities come across a lot more vulnerable? We just had a conversation the other day on inclusion and diversity, and we talked about menopause guidelines, which we're launching for our employees and the support system. To the extent that our leaders share their own personal stories to bring it to life. So how do you really bring personal stories, come across as vulnerable? Because when you do that, it changes the engagement, changes the culture and the environment.
I think I couldn't have agreed more, Arif. And I don't know if I got it correct, but did you just say that you want to make the daily moments for our people special, and you want to create the daily moments for your people and critical moments special?
Daily moments simple and critical moments special.
Wow, that's a beautiful line. I think that's a beautiful line. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Arif. Yes, and now I'm going to move to the third part of this discussion. And I think it's very, very critical to know. Our leaders have been talking about these amazing initiatives that they've spearheaded in their different organizations. And the kind of examples that have come to life are just amazing. And now I want to see that how do our leaders foresee the evolution of HR role with the help of new employee priorities? That is one, while innovating for success. I think we all agree that 2 years have been full of learnings, but so would be the next time that's coming for us. So how do our leaders are actually prioritizing on that? And innovating for success is something that's really critical to a business and any business for that matter. So I'm going to come to Roshni first for this one.
Thank you, Soumya. Yes, I think the learnings have been immense over the last 2 years, and it will be pity not to really put them into a practice and go back to what we used to be pre-pandemic times. I just feel, and coming back to this whole topic of well-being, well-being is everyone's responsibility. And that's becoming highlighted extremely sharply in the times today, where we are getting into a much more complex environment and very, very ambiguous environment of working. The role of HR in this is going to be twofold. One, building a very, very strong proximity with people. HR doesn't have the sort of luxury of meeting people on the corridor. Of course, those will happen in few, bits and pieces. But in the virtual environment, how do you still continue to build a very, very strong proximity? How do you know the stories of your people, their families, their challenges? I think those are going to be a very, very critical part of the role that HR has to continue to play that. And second is, I think the role of managers in today's time has become extremely, extremely critical. And the role of HR in this is to how do we enable the managers to be able to build that strong connect with their people. This is extremely important. It sets the right culture in the organization. It needs to be well supported by the process and recognition so that managers are empowered and they feel in part of the place to be able to connect with their teams. So that's really, I think, the role of HR is going to be a lot of our processes. Technology will start coming into a play. A lot of roles and responsibilities that we do day in, day out will completely be technologized and digitized and so on. But I think this whole humanistic values that we have to continue to inculcate in the organization will be extremely important for HR to drive.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Roshni. Absolutely agreed on that. Anupam, I'm coming to you now.
Sure. And I'll probably answer this question a little differently, Soumya, if that's okay, right? I think, when you look at the way HR typically functions, right, we're very inward looking in the sense that we're always looking at what do we need to do for our employees, for our people, for our talent, right? If you ask me, the future that I see for the function is probably along three vectors, and I'm going to call them people, purpose, and policy, and I'll explain what I mean. And I think when I look at it from a people perspective, that is where, for me, it is about the inward lens, which is what is it that you need to do with the people and talent in your organization. And note, I'm calling them people, not employees, because the one thing that we've all realized is like Arav just mentioned, work and life is no longer different. This is life, that's it. So you have to look at it with respect to them as people and what are the experiences that they value? What is it that they all want? And the shift that we're seeing is it's soon going to be a one size fits one, which means that there is scope for innovation. But there's also scope for scale, and there's also scope for really leveraging technology, both as enabling scale, but also with respect to creating experiences. So I think we're going to start to see a significant shift with the way that the function operates, especially with respect to taking care of people and talent within the organization. Having said that, where the purpose piece comes in is you cannot now just look within your organization. That remit has gone long back, right, for all of us as organizations and especially for us as a function. So the need to start to think beyond the organization, right, to start to think about the communities that you are a part of. What is it that you can do with the community? And it isn't just about volunteering or donations. The role that we will play with respect to skill building, the role that we will actually start to play with respect to empowering the next generation of talent, right? So there's a lot more when you start to think of it from a purpose perspective and the role that we can really, really play, taking it beyond CSR or community impact to really, really think, hey, what is it that we can really do for the country or for the world or for the talent, right? And I think that's what I mean by purpose. The last is policy. Things have been shifting so much and so drastically, right? Especially over the last few years. And I think in the function, we have a role to come together and really, really start to influence what does some of those policies or regulations start to look like for us to really, really help organizations, people, and leaders really come to drive impact, right? And I think there's an element that we have to play there. So which is why, for me, I think the way that I see the function shifting and evolving with everything that's been happening, not just over the last 2 years, but if you look at everything that's been happening over the last decade, but even with the learnings over the last few years, I feel like our role is going to shift into people, purpose, and policy.
Wow, that was a beautiful deconstruction. Thank you for that, Anupam. Arif, I'm coming to you very quickly.
Yeah, Swami, I'll just build up on what Anupam said.
Yes.
Two things. One is what, and I think the relationship between employee and organization cannot just be that contract. And if it's that only employment contract, that anytime you get a lucrative contract, it will get good. We just talked about great resignation and what's happening. I think it's a lot about what am I here for? What does the organization's purpose mean? And how do I connect and what role do I play? And how does it connect to my purpose? As I reflect on our purpose, which is celebration of life every day, everywhere, and life celebration is not just about fun, it's about making a difference in the world we live in. I think building those connections and really making it come true for an employee to feel that my purpose comes true by being part of this organization. I think that's the most fundamental shift, just building on what Anupam said, which we need. However, I would just put a challenge to the team. If you look at how we do it, this world, when I started my career, was a lot about benchmarking. Let's go and get the best practices. And I'm going to position my company in the top quartile. No more the same situation. The challenges are unknown, and it's a lot more dynamic world. How do we create unique opportunities and solutions for our people will be one big opportunity. And second thing, I would say what Lakshmi had said, that, leveraging technology for mental wellness and so on. Guys, this world is moving fast on technology. And I must say, I feel that HR as a function has been a laggard. How we leverage and adopt technology to bring all these come true is another opportunity for us. So I'm back to you.
That was a soul-stirring statement that we are being a laggard. Thank you for that, Arif. And just absolutely in agreement to that technology is going to be a game changer. And it is, and it will always be. So thank you for that. Very quickly, in the interest of time that I see, I have just about 8 more minutes. And Lakshmi, I'm going to come to you now. What are the top 3 indexes, if you can just list them down, for crafting a sustainable as well as an impactful wellness program? So maybe you can just let us know, and probably an example would be great for our audience.
Sure thing. I kind of give it a little bit of a twist to the question itself, because to me, it is about holistic. So therefore, how do you focus on body, mind, heart, and soul, and the whole person at home or elsewhere? And also, it's also about creating a caring and resilient environment where people can truly thrive. So I would say to all folks listening today, there are 3 considerations as you shape your wellness programs. Firstly, this is a space that is evolving. So we need to be actively listening to our people, because their needs are rapidly evolving. And so in order for it to remain meaningful, remain relevant, that is something that's absolutely critical. The second element is around, I think we've all spoken about it in different ways, is about choice and flexibility. This is an extremely crucial one because well-being is very, very unique to each person. Every individual's requirement varies depending on their personal situation or the situation of their family, which kind of prompted us to make the enhancements in our insurance benefits, like I mentioned earlier, or even holidays. One thing that we realized very quickly as people were moving to different parts of the country and not necessarily in the same location where they were originally staffed to was, I'm from Calcutta, but I live in Bangalore. So how do I, as a person living in Bangalore, avail of holidays that are more relevant to, say, Calcutta, or if I celebrate Karwa Chauth, which is more relevant in North India, but it's not a leave in South India. So introducing flexibility in our holidays was something that we took on a couple of years back. And the third very important consideration as we craft sustainable programs is to think about how do you continually evolve your program based on the impact and success of these programs. And there was a question I saw pop up saying, how do you measure impact? It could be utilization, or it could be how many people have used it more regularly. But having a mechanism to listen and get feedback from your people on how they're experiencing the program's benefits and impacts is critical. So it's really 3 things to bear in mind as you shape well-being programs. 1, actively listen, create programs that offer choice and flexibility, and measure the impact and success to know they're actually working for your people.
Wow. Thank you. And I hope the audience has taken that down. I'm coming to the round 2 for this, to Arif. Arif, what would be for you the top three, matrices while you're designing this program?
Yeah, instead of matrices, I'll say top three variables we should keep in mind. Infrastructure support from the organization, engagement and excitement through employee resource groups, because that will be fundamental to the success. And last, how do you really make it real for our people managers and really make them as enablers versus just being users of policies. So I would say if we focus on these three variables, we can make a huge difference.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that, Arif. I think, Lakshmi and Arif, you really kind of pointed it out and it was very comprehensive for our audience. So thank you for that. And yes, now that brings me to the last question. And believe me, there's so much more that I want to ask and hold our panel back. But again, there's a paucity of time. So I'm going to leave all of our audience for a very futuristic note. And yes, I am going to come back to your questions before the session ends. But I would love to hear from, and let me just start with Anupam first. Anupam, how do you see the road ahead for employee well-being evolving in the next curve? And you can tell me, like Soumya, there are probably the two sides that I look at or anything that's good.
I think quite simply, right? I think what we've all understood is that if you want your employees to bring their best to work every day, they need to be at their best, right? Physically, emotionally, mentally. Absolutely. We all know that. We've discussed that, right? I think quite simply for all of us in our organizations, that well-being has to be anchored in who you are as an organization. What is your culture? What is your value? What is your foundation? So it has to be anchored in that. I think two other things, like in addition to what Lakshmi and Arif said, keep it simple. Well-being doesn't always need to be very, very complicated. Sometimes it's simple solutions that actually hit the mark. But I think there's also scope to co-develop, co-experiment, fail forward with well-being. There is no one and done. So keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep it as a focus.
Oh, that was like a powerful nugget. Thank you. Thank you for that, Anupam. Roshni, I'm coming to you.
So I think I really like what Anupam just said, and it's all true. If I were to just add one point to this, is to make sure that in this ambiguous and complex environment, what we need to continue drive is the whole psychological safety net. The more your people speak to you, the more you are able to understand, the more you are able to create solutions for them. So for me, I think psychological safety net is really very important to build as a culture.
Absolutely. Thank you. Arif, what will your take be?
I think it's about co-shared ownership and really shared partnership with employees. Learning along the journey and, moving in the positive direction.
I love these words. Arif, definitely I'm coming back to you after this session and taking all my notes on that. Thank you for that. Lakshmi, I'm coming to you.
Well, I'd say caring for your people is caring for your business. And if any of you listening is getting any pushback from your business leaders, use this trick that has always worked for me, which is share some research, right? So let me share some research findings from Accenture's research. It is called Care to Do Better. It's available to all of you in the public domain. This research really establishes that meeting 6 fundamental human needs at work, organizations can unlock people's full potential. And what are these needs, right? They're emotional and mental, relational, physical, financial, purposeful, and employable. And we found through our research, it's a global research, that 64% of our person's potential or their ability to perform is influenced by whether they feel better off across these 6 dimensions. And so when people are net better off, they are 5 times more likely to experience increased performance, which automatically translates into business performance. So therefore, leaders can achieve this by building trust, by truly caring for their people, by understanding, being empathetic towards their needs, and whether it be mental, physical, emotional, or any needs, and demonstrating through personal example that self-care is essential and not self-indulgent.
Self-care is essential. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Lakshmi. And thank you, everyone. I think this was fabulous. I had planned to wrap up our question and answers by 45, but see, we are at 50. And there's so much more that's coming our way. So now I'm going to kind of open the audience questions and we can take it and if there's any preference, please feel free to choose it. The first question that I'm going to pick is from Smriti, and she wants to know more about how to engage with the team, both in the online and offline. I think that's a very relatable question because leaders are struggling with these things. So if we can take like one thing to engage better in an online world and an offline will be helpful. So Anupam, would you like to start?
Sure. I'll give you a simple example. I think one of the questions which we all take so much for granted, but has a lot of power behind it, is simply asking people, how are you? And when they give you a really safe answer, go back and ask them, how are you again? And you will be amazed with the responses you get. Works virtually, works offline, works in all situations. Sometimes it's the very basic questions that get you what you need.
Wow, that is so true, Anupam. That is so true. Thank you. Arif, I'm coming to you. What will your answer be for our audience?
I love Anupam's response. The only thing I would add is, people have critical moments going on in life. Somebody went to a hospital, somebody's parents were unwell or something. Just take a couple of moments to ask about it. People are people. It's not the contract with the company, right? So you ask about that and you will touch a chord and it will go along.
That is so true. I think that just reminds me that if there's a problem, just accepting that problem is like 50% done. And then you can find the solution. And these are the basics that we have really forgotten. But I'm so glad that this panel of speakers are being so honest about it and telling us the most obvious things that we might have really overlooked. So thank you. Lakshmi, what your take would be on this? One thing that you want to highlight?
I think it's about, it's about human connections. It's about asking before you start any conversation how the person is feeling, because not just how you're doing, but how you're actually feeling, because that then opens them up and generates a very different response. And so, like you said, it's really back to the basics.
It's back to the basics.
Offline.
Absolutely. Thank you. Rashmi, what would you like to add?
I think this is very important because as we are going into O+O meeting, virtual and offline, both together formats, creating a very inclusive meetings is going to be very important. So it's not when you are in face-to-face, you are involved in the meeting and people who are offline are forgotten about because they are on the screen and not featuring. Just having an inclusive conversation in the meetings is really something that I feel important.
Absolutely. And that's a very strong way to, as we go ahead in this hybrid world. So I think that's a very, very powerful learning there. Thank you for that, Roshni. Coming to the next question. So Girish is asking us, and that's quite interesting actually, that what is the engagement code that can be implemented across any industry? And it's a good fit for our panel because we have a very diverse set of speakers on the stage today. So I think let me start with Roshni. Why not you?
I love one quote that somebody mentioned in the panel today, one size fits one. Sorry, I think I stole it from somewhere, but it's in my mind. So I just said one size fits one. I think that's the way to go about engaging with your teams.
Beautiful. I think, Girish, that helps you. Arif, I would come to you if you want to add anything.
Something we talked about earlier in the panel, power of purpose. All of us are here for making a difference to our lives and the world around us. We can give people the power of purpose and help them fulfill that at work. I think we'll achieve a lot.
Great. Thank you for that, Arif. And these questions and answers, in a way, are more like a revision of the session. So whatever has already been there, we are just going to rerun on them very quickly. Anupam, would you like to add anything for Girish's question? Any standard engagement code that is industry specific or across?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Roshni, I'm going to charge you for using that one.
That was you?
No, I think for me, it's quite simply, it is about people, period. I think the minute you start to think of it from a people lens, I think that's what we need to do.
Wow, that's where the battle is won. Thank you. Thank you for that, Anupam. Lakshmi, I'm coming to you very quickly.
I think I'll reiterate what I said, which is self-care is not self-indulgence. It is essential, and that's going to be critical, especially as we think about well-being and connections that people need to form.
Absolutely. That is so true. That is so true. Thank you. And I still have just 5 more minutes. I know there's a lot of energy happening, but let me just close it with one last question. And this is something that all of you have touched upon in your reflections today. So Samarjit is asking us that how can we empower our staff to establish their own support networks? I think that's very important. And maybe if you can just say like one hack to the audience, it's going to be great. Arif, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think we need to realize for people to build their own support networks, we don't need to empower them. What we need to do is to create the right environment that they feel comfortable to take charge of their own careers. So I think if we can focus on the environment and culture, things will come.
I think that's exactly where Arif had started sharing it. That cultural thread is very, very important as we go ahead. Thank you for that, Arif. Roshni, I'm coming to you.
I would say we talk a lot about empowerment and how we can give to people. I will really coin this word differently to say empowerment. Just feel the power inside you so that you are able to, take any initiatives that you want. Just come and partner with us.
Absolutely. What you're looking is right there. So it's an innate power that we are highlighting from this conversation. Thank you so much for that, Roshni. Lakshmi, I'm coming to you now.
I think in my view, it's about, really taking your people along and co-creating with them, listening to them, because like I said, this is a complex space that is constantly evolving. And so it's important that we don't assume that we know all the answers, but really take people along and really work alongside with all our people to come with the right solutions that are relevant for them.
That is so beautiful, Lakshmi. I think it's pretty much like a synchronized, reverie into your past. Like Arif said, it's culture. Like Roshni said, it's innate power. And Lakshmi is saying it's people. So these are not new things. These are no terms that we are telling you that you might have not heard. But it's just that we're taking you back to the basics. I think that has been it. Anupam, I'm coming to you. What will your take be?
I think just to add to what Lakshmi said, I think we're all in this together, and the need to shift to trust from permission.
Wow. That I just love that how curated and how crisp my panel is today. So thank you for that. I hope, Girish, you found your answer. I know there are a couple of questions that are still standing there, and trust me, I would have loved to take them all, but please feel free to connect with our speakers offline, and I'm sure you're going to find your answers. This has been an interesting conversation today. It was so buzzing. I can still see the questions coming in. But yes, as time says, it is the end for it. So thank you so much, everyone. It was such a delight to moderate this conversation and this super powerful group of leaders. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Arif, Anupam, Lakshmi, and Roshni for your honesty, for your candor, and for your vivaciousness. So big thank you from my end and from my team's side. We did learn a lot of perspectives today, a lot of takeaways, I must say, and together we have definitely catalyzed the conversations rooting for a scalable and sustainable wellness pillars. So thank you so much once again for being a part of this tribe. And with this, we come to the end of today's session. And as Mahatma Gandhi always says, that future depends on what you do today. In the long run, a laser focus on prioritizing employee wellness will define the new age workplace. And this is exactly what we saw in today's conversation. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to take a moment to thank our teams, Economic Times, ETHRWorld, and Diageo, who've put in their relentless efforts to carve this discussion. A big thank you to our wonderful audience for all your questions and reflections and your energy. You are definitely the perspective window that helps us in staying true and relevant in our endeavors. Big thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic weekend ahead, if I would say. It's Friday morning now. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.